"Your driver's a creep," the little girl declared, pointing at the millionaire's trusted chauffeur. A background check reveals something that immediately brings tears to the millionaire's eyes. "Please rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help." The morning sun in Phoenix, Arizona, painted the storefronts with a golden hue, as Walter St. Clair, at 58, adjusted his tie in front of his office mirror. Owner of the largest chain of hardware stores in northern Arizona, he cultivated an impeccable image that reflected the traditional values inherited from generations of Arizona businessmen. His calloused hands contrasted with his Italian suit, a reminder of the times he worked alongside his father in the small shop that had become an empire. Constance, his 54-year-old wife, was finishing her gray hair when the phone rang. The call from Roger Matthews, the family's driver for 15 years, was brief and professional as always. A man of few words, Roger would arrive in 10 minutes to take Walter to the grand opening of the new store in Flagstaff. The gleaming black Cadillac pulled up in front of the residential building at 7:30 on the dot. Roger, 45, stepped out with precise movements, opening the rear door with the same discreet courtesy he had maintained for a decade and a half. Married to Marlene for 20 years and father of 2 teenagers, he embodied the reliability that Walter so valued in his employees. The drive proceeded in the usual silence when a small figure darted out between the parked cars at the intersection of Camelback Road. The little girl, only 4 years old, with disheveled hair and clothes that looked like she'd slept in them, planted herself in front of the car with impressive determination for her age. "Your driver's a creep!" shouted Isabella, pointing directly at Roger through the windshield. Her brown eyes shone with a disturbing intensity, carrying secrets too heavy for a child. Walter felt his stomach clench. In 30 years of business, he had developed a keen instinct for detecting problems, and that childish accusation triggered all his internal alarms. Roger remained motionless at the wheel, his fingers gripping the leather with growing force. "He's a creep. I know what he does," continued Isabella, banging her dirty little hands on the hood. Passers-by began to gather, some pulling out cell phones to record the unusual scene. "Mr. St. Clair, I don't—" Roger tried to explain, but his voice came out choked. The light turned green, but Walter couldn't process the situation. He had known Roger since the young man was 30, newly married and desperate for work. There had never been a single complaint, a single suspicion. The man took Constance to the doctor, picked up the nephews from school, participated in family barbecues. "Get out of the car," ordered Walter, feeling the weight of the moral responsibility he carried as an employer. Isabella retreated a few steps as Walter approached, but kept her chin raised defiantly. Up close, he could see the girl's condition better, bare feet dirty with soil, a torn shirt on her shoulder, small bruises on her knees indicating recent falls. "What's your name?" asked Walter, crouching down to her level. "Isabella, and he is a creep," she repeated, pointing again at Roger. "Why are you saying that?" The girl hesitated for the first time, biting her lower lip. "My grandma said. She said he's bad and does bad things." Roger approached slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "Mr. St. Clair, I swear to God I don't know what this child is talking about. I've never seen her in my life." "Liar!" shouted Isabella. "You go to Grandpa Ben's house. My grandma saw you." The name hit Roger like a punch. Walter noticed the instantaneous change in the driver's expression. It wasn't guilt, but something like panic mixed with deep pain. "Who's Ben?" asked Walter. Roger opened and closed his mouth several times before he could speak. He's my father, sir." "Your father? You never mentioned—" "He has dementia," Roger whispered. "Lives in a nursing home. I visit him sometimes." Isabella crossed her thin arms. "On Tuesdays and Thursdays. I know because Grandma Doris tells me everything." The crowd grew around them. Cell phones captured every word, every gesture. Walter felt the weight of public exposure mixed with the confusion that took over his thoughts. 15 years of absolute trust were being questioned by a 4-year-old child in the middle of the avenue. "Roger, let's talk in the office," decided Walter. "And you, little one, where do you live? Where are your parents?" "I live with Grandma Doris. She'll be mad if she knows I left." Isabella lowered her head for the first time, revealing a vulnerability that broke Walter's heart. "Then let's take her back," he said, still processing the conflicting information. The drive to Doris's house was tense. Isabella sat in the back seat next to Walter, recounting confused fragments about a grandfather who didn't recognize her and a grandmother who cried every night blaming that creepy man for all the family's problems. The house where they stopped was an old bungalow in the West Phoenix neighborhood with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Doris appeared at the door before they even got out, a thin woman of 62, grey hair tied in a tight bun, and eyes that distilled accumulated bitterness. "Isabella, how many times have I told you not to go out alone?" she shouted, but her tone changed completely when she saw Roger. "And you? What are you doing here?" "Mrs. Doris, we found the girl in the street making accusations," explained Walter. "We need to talk." "Accusations?" Doris pulled Isabella close to her. "She only told the truth. That man abandoned my father-in-law in a filthy nursing home and never showed his face again." "That's not true," Roger burst out. "I visit him twice a week." "Visit?" Doris laughed bitterly. "You call that a visit? 15 minutes looking at a man who doesn't even know who you are?" Walter watched the pain cross Roger's face like an open wound. There was something deeper there, secrets that had been corroding the family for years. Isabella hid behind her grandmother's legs, but her curious eyes didn't miss a single detail of the discussion. "Mr. St. Clair," said Roger with a broken voice, "I can explain everything, but not here, not in front of her." Doris squeezed Isabella's shoulders. "There's nothing to explain. Some men are born without character, and others—" She looked directly at Walter. "Others are too rich to see who works for them." The words hit Walter like slaps. In 15 years, he had never questioned Roger's absences on Tuesdays and Thursdays, never asked about his family beyond Marlene and the children. How many secrets did his driver carry alone? When they returned to the car, a heavy silence settled between them. Walter cancelled the trip to Flagstaff, instructing Roger to take him back home. He needed to talk to Constance. He needed to understand how a childish accusation had exposed so many layers of pain and secrets in his own extended family. But one question tormented him as he watched Roger drive with mechanical movements. If Isabella knew details about the visits to the nursing home, what other secrets did that abandoned child carry? And why had her grandmother taught her to see Roger as the enemy? The day that had begun, with the predictable routine of always now promised to reveal truths that no one was prepared to face. Constance dropped the porcelain cup when Walter finished recounting the morning's events. The hot liquid spread across the marble of the kitchen, but she didn't even notice. Her blue eyes, still beautiful, despite years of accumulated sadness, filled with tears that he knew well, those that came whenever a child appeared in his life. "A 4-year-old girl, alone in the street," she murmured, her hands trembling as she picked up the cloth to clean the spilled coffee. "Walter, you can't just ignore this." "I'm not ignoring it. But I need to understand what's happening with Roger first." Walter loosened his tie, feeling the weight of the responsibility he carried for his employees. 15 years, Constance. 15 years, and I never knew he had a sick father." Constance stopped cleaning and looked directly at her husband. "Have you ever asked? Have you ever shown genuine interest in his life beyond work?" The question hurt, because Walter knew the answer. In all these years, conversations with Roger were limited to schedules, destinations, and eventually the weather. He treated his employees well, paid fair wages, offered benefits, but never crossed the invisible line between boss and employee. "I'll talk to him tomorrow," said Walter. "But first I want to understand this story about the grandmother and the girl." "Isabella," Constance corrected softly. "Her name is Isabella." During the rest of the day, Constance couldn't get the image of the girl out of her head. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw a small child facing adults in the middle of the avenue, carrying accusations she barely understood. She remembered her own daughter, Caroline, who would be 22 years old if she hadn't passed away when she was only 6. The next morning, Constance made a decision that would change everything. She put on a simple outfit, took a bag with children's clothes she had kept for years, pieces she bought impulsively whenever she saw something beautiful in stores, fueling a hope she never admitted out loud, and drove to the West Phoenix neighborhood. Doris's house seemed even more run down in the daylight. The iron gate was loose on its hinges, the garden overgrown, and the windows urgently needed a coat of paint. Constance took a deep breath before knocking on the door. Doris answered suspiciously, immediately recognizing the discreet elegance of the visitor. "If you came to defend that creep, you can leave." "I came to talk about Isabella," said Constance firmly. "I brought some clothes for her." "We don't need your charity." Doris tried to close the door, but Constance held it gently. "It's not charity. It's a concerned grandmother offering help to another grandmother." The white lie came naturally. "Can I come in?" Doris hesitated, then opened the door reluctantly. The inside of the house smelled of mildew and medicine. Old furniture occupied the small living room, and piles of old newspapers were stacked in the corners. On the faded sofa, Isabella was watching a cartoon on an old television, wearing the same clothes as the day before. "Hi, Grandma," said Isabella, running to hug Constance's legs. The spontaneous gesture made Constance's heart skip a beat. "Hi, sweetheart. I brought some clothes for you." Constance crouched down, taking a light blue dress of the right size out of the bag. "Want to try it on?" Isabella's eyes lit up, but she looked quickly at Doris. "Can I, Grandma?" "Sure," muttered Doris, clearly embarrassed by the unexpected kindness. While Isabella ran to the room to change, Constance observed Doris more closely. The woman had shoulders bent by the weight of responsibilities too heavy, deep dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights, and rough hands that trembled slightly. "How long have you been taking care of her alone?" asked Constance softly. 2 years, replied Doris, sitting heavily in a chair. "Since she left. And Isabella's father? Died in a work accident when she was 2. My daughter never recovered." Doris wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "She got sick, you know, sick in the head. Started not eating, not sleeping, not taking care of the girl right." Constance felt a pang in her chest. She knew this pain well, the devastation that the loss of a child could cause. "And then she left too. Left Isabella with me and a letter saying she couldn't anymore." Doris broke down, tears finally overflowing. "I did what I could, but a primary school teacher's pension isn't enough." Isabella ran back, radiant in the new dress. "Grandma Doris, look how pretty it is." "It's beautiful," said Constance, fixing the girl's hair. "And how about we go get some ice cream, you two?" "I can't accept anything else," protested Doris. "It's not accepting, it's talking between women who know pain." Constance gently touched Doris's arm. "Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands." At the ice cream parlor in downtown Phoenix, while Isabella savored a strawberry popsicle, Doris finally opened her heart. She told about the last 2 years trying to raise a traumatized child with minimal resources, about the nights when Isabella woke up crying, calling for her mother, about the guilt she carried for not being able to give her granddaughter the life she deserved. "And this Roger?" asked Constance delicately. Doris's face closed again. "Ben was my father-in-law, a good man who worked his whole life to support his family. When he got sick, Roger simply abandoned him in a public nursing home and forgot he existed. But Isabella said he visits when he remembers, 15 minutes, half an hour at most. And he never brought his wife, never introduced his children to their grandfather. Ben dies a little more each day in that horrible place, and his own son pretends he doesn't exist. Constance absorbed the information, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle. There was something that didn't fit in the story, but she couldn't identify what. Why did Isabella go looking for Walter yesterday? Doris sighed. She hears everything. I was talking to the neighbor about how the rich never care about the suffering of the poor, about how Roger's boss doesn't even know the employee has a family. Isabella recorded every word and decided to do justice her way. Doing justice? Telling the truth to those who have the power to do something. Doris looked at Isabella, who was trying to reach a butterfly that had landed on the table next to her. That girl is too smart for her own age. Sometimes it scares me how much she understands. Constance watched Isabella for a moment. The child had stopped chasing the butterfly and was now watching it with scientific curiosity, noting the colors of the wings, the delicate movement of the antennae. There was a brilliant intelligence in those brown eyes, a sharp perception that was really impressive. "Doris, can I make a proposal?" said Constance suddenly. "How about Isabella comes to spend some afternoons at my house? I have free time, and she could play, maybe do some activities." "Why?" Doris stiffened immediately. "Out of pity? Out of charity? Out of affection," Constance replied honestly. "It's been a long time since I had a child around, and maybe you need some time to breathe, to take care of yourself too." Doris was silent for a long time, watching Isabella, who was now drawing doodles on the condensation of her soda glass. "She draws all the time," she murmured. "Little birds, flowers, little houses. Says when she grows up she's going to be an artist." "Then maybe she needs better materials than vapor on a glass," Constance said softly. That night, when Constance told Walter about her afternoon with Doris and Isabella, he was quiet for a long time. He had known his wife for over 20 years. He knew when she made a decision that would change their lives. "You want to bring her home," he said finally. "I want to help her, and help Doris too." Constance sat down next to her husband on the bed. "Walter, that child is growing up in very difficult conditions. Doris does what she can, but you want to do more." "I need to do more," Constance corrected. "I can't pretend I don't know what's going on." Walter took his wife's hand. "And Roger? I still haven't talked to him properly about this whole situation." "Schedule it for tomorrow. But go with an open mind, Walter. Sometimes people carry burdens we can't see." The next morning, as Walter prepared for the most difficult conversation of his 15 years as Roger's employer, Constance called Doris, offering to pick up Isabella for a trip to the park. On the other end of the line, she heard the woman's tired voice accepting with gratitude, disguised as resignation. None of them imagined that this series of small decisions, the honest conversation that would come, the trip to the park, the trust that began to form between strangers, would trigger discoveries that would change not only their lives, but reveal secrets kept for decades about connections that no one suspected existed. Roger arrived at Walter's office an hour before work, as requested. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie for the 10th time. In 15 years of work, he had never been called for a formal conversation, and the sleepless night had left deep marks on his face. "Sit down, Roger," said Walter, pointing to the armchair in front of his desk. The tone was serious, but not hostile. "We need to talk about yesterday, about your father." Roger swallowed hard. "Mr. St. Clair, I can explain everything." "Then explain." 15 years, Roger. "Why didn't you ever tell me you had a sick father?" The words were stuck in Roger's throat for a few seconds. He looked at his hands, then at the window, anywhere but the boss's eyes. Because it's complicated, sir." "Complicated how?" "My father has had dementia for 6 years, advanced Alzheimer's. He hasn't recognized me for 3 years." Roger's voice broke slightly. "When he got sick, I tried to take care of him at home. Marlene helped me, but it was very difficult. He left the house in the middle of the night, got lost, sometimes became aggressive. Walter leaned back in his chair, observing the genuine pain on the employee's face. And then we had to put him in a nursing home, but we didn't have the money for a good private clinic, so he went to the St. Vincent's Home, which is public. Roger paused, tears threatening to spill over. Mr. St. Clair, you can't imagine what that place is like. Overcrowded rooms, overworked staff, lack of everything. But you visit him twice a week, religiously, Tuesday and Thursday after work. Roger finally looked up. He doesn't know who I am, hasn't spoken for 2 years, but I go there, I sit next to him, tell him about the grandchildren he doesn't remember he has, show him pictures he doesn't recognize. Why didn't you tell me? Maybe I could have helped. Roger laughed bitterly. With all due respect, sir, you already do a lot for me. Good salary, health insurance, bonus on time. I didn't want to seem like I was asking for a favor or handouts. Walter felt a weight in his stomach. During all these years, Roger had carried this burden alone, maintaining impeccable professionalism while suffering in silence. And Doris? Why does she hate you so much? Doris is the mother of Joanne, who was married to my brother Richard. Roger took a deep breath. When Richard died in the construction accident, Joanne was very bad. Doris blamed the whole family, said that if Richard hadn't married my sister, he wouldn't have gone to work on that construction site. Joanne was your sister-in-law. She was. And Isabella is my niece. The revelation came out as a whisper. When she left too, leaving Isabella with Doris, I offered help. I wanted to bring the girl home, take care of her together with my children. But Doris said that our family had already caused too much suffering. Walter got up from his chair, walking to the window. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but creating an even more complex picture than he had imagined. She doesn't let you see Isabella? She lets me, but in her house, with supervision. And she always speaks badly of me in front of the girl, says I abandoned my father, that I'm irresponsible. Roger wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Isabella is too smart. She absorbs everything, repeats everything. Yesterday, when she appeared shouting those things, I knew it was Doris speaking through her. Roger, why didn't you look for me before, 15 years working together? Because you already had your own problems, Mr. St. Clair, Mrs. Constance. After losing your daughter, you became very reserved. I didn't want to bother you with my dramas. The mention of Caroline made Walter close his eyes. It was true. After the loss of their daughter, he and Constance closed themselves off from the world, maintaining superficial relationships even with people close to them. How many other stories of suffering had he ignored for being immersed in his own pain? Does Marlene know all this? Roger hesitated before answering. Not everything. She knows about my father, accompanies me on visits sometimes, but she doesn't know about how much this affects me. She doesn't know that sometimes I cry on the way back from the home. She doesn't know that I spend nights awake wondering if I'm doing enough. And about Isabella. Marlene knows she exists, but she never managed to meet her properly. Doris doesn't like her, says she's too neat, too much of a preppy. Marlene even offered to help with clothes, school supplies, but Doris always refuses. Walter returned to the table, sitting on the edge. Roger, I'm going to ask a direct question. Do you want help? What do you mean, sir? Help with your father, with Isabella's situation, with all this you've been carrying alone for years. Roger looked at him in disbelief. Mr. St. Clair, I can't accept. It's not a question of accepting. It's a question of doing what's right. Walter leaned forward. Constance spent yesterday with Doris and Isabella. She told me about the conditions they live in. The lady went there? She did, and came back determined to help. You know how she gets when she decides something. Roger nodded. He knew Constance's decisive personality well. He had witnessed her strength during the family's most difficult moments. I have a proposal, continued Walter. How about we transfer your father to a private clinic? I can advance the costs and deduct it from your salary in easy installments. Mr. St. Clair, that must cost a fortune. And how about we offer support for Doris too? Constance is thinking of hiring a helper for her, someone who can assist with Isabella while she rests. Roger was silent, processing the offers that seemed too good to be true. Why would you do that? Because in 15 years you've never disappointed me. Because it's the right thing to do, and because... Walter paused, struggling with his own emotions. Because I also know what it's like to lose important people and not be able to protect them. At that moment, Walter's phone rang. It was Constance, and her voice was agitated. "Walter, you need to come home now." "What happened?" "It's Isabella. She's getting sick. I think it's something serious." Walter and Roger ran to the car. During the journey, Roger told more details about Isabella's health that had worried him for months. The girl had been losing weight, had frequent headaches, and Doris, out of pride or lack of resources, had not taken the child to the doctor properly. When they arrived at Walter's house, they found Constance on the living room sofa with Isabella lying in her lap. The girl was pale, breathing with difficulty, and her little hands were cold. "She fainted in the park," explained Constance, stroking the child's hair. "She was playing normally, suddenly fell. Doris is coming here." "Let's go to the hospital," Walter decided immediately. "I already called Dr. Harrison. He'll meet us at St. Joseph's." Roger approached, gently touching Isabella's forehead. "My niece," he murmured, and for the first time since Walter had known him, he saw tears streaming down the driver's face. When Doris arrived, panting and desperate, the group's dynamic changed completely. She ran to Isabella, taking her in her arms with a protective force that surprised everyone. "What did you do to her?" she accused, looking from Constance to Walter with suspicion. "Doris, she fainted in the park," explained Constance patiently. "She needs medical care." "I don't have money for a private hospital," said Doris, pride struggling against despair. "Don't worry about that now," said Walter. "Let's take care of Isabella first, then we'll resolve the rest." On the way to the hospital, Isabella opened her eyes briefly. She looked around, confused, then fixed her gaze on Roger. "Uncle Roger," she murmured in a weak voice, "did you come to get me?" "I came, my little one. Uncle is here." Doris looked from Roger to Isabella, then to Constance and Walter. For the first time in years, she saw her granddaughter receiving the care and attention she deserved. The pride that had kept her isolated began to crack, leaving room for a vulnerability that she had hidden for so long. "If she gets better," said Doris softly, maybe we can talk about accepting help." Dr. Harrison greeted them at the entrance of the hospital, and Isabella was immediately taken for examinations. While they waited in the hallway, Walter observed the strange dynamic of his new extended family. Constance consoling Doris, Roger pacing nervously back and forth, and he himself feeling a paternal responsibility that he had not experienced for years. When the doctor finally came out of the examination room, his grave face made everyone stand up at once. "We need to talk," said Dr. Harrison. "Isabella will be fine, but we discovered something that explains her symptoms, something that will require long-term treatment." The silence that followed was filled with tension and fear. None of them were prepared to discover that the journey of caring for Isabella would be much more complex than they had imagined. Dr. Harrison led the group to his private office, where Isabella slept peacefully on a small stretcher, the tests spread over the table. Doris did not let go of her granddaughter's hand for a second, while Constance, Walter, and Roger awaited the explanations with growing anxiety. "Isabella has severe anemia caused by prolonged malnutrition," began the doctor, observing the reactions of each one. "But there's something else." Blood tests revealed a rare hereditary deficiency, Wilson's disease, which affects the metabolism of copper in the body. Doris paled. "Is that serious?" "It's treatable, but requires constant medical monitoring and specific medication for the rest of her life," explained Dr. Harrison. "If not treated properly, it can cause irreversible damage to the liver and nervous system." "How much does this treatment cost?" asked Doris, already knowing that the answer would be devastating to her budget. "The main drug costs about $800 a month," replied the doctor, "in addition to regular exams and specialized consultations." Doris closed her eyes, calculating mentally. Her pension barely covered the basic expenses of the house. $800 a month was impossible. "Doctor," said Walter, stepping forward, "if we do private with health insurance, how long does it take to get all the medications and start treatment?" "With a good plan, a matter of days. The important thing is to start as soon as possible." Doris turned to Walter with tears in her eyes. "Mr. St. Clair, I can't accept—" "You're not accepting charity," Constance interrupted softly. "You're accepting help from a family that cares about Isabella." "Family?" Doris looked confused at each of those present. Roger approached, sitting next to the bed where Isabella slept. "Doris, I know you hate me. I know you think I abandoned my father, that I'm not man enough to take care of my family, but this girl is my niece. She's my brother's daughter, and I love her as if she were my own daughter." "Then why never—" Doris began, but Roger interrupted her. "Because you never let me. Every time I offered help, you refused. Every time I wanted to take her to meet her cousins, you made up an excuse. I respected your will because I thought it was best for Isabella, but now I see that I was wrong." Constance approached Doris. "Can I ask a question? Why are you so afraid to accept help?" Doris was silent for a long time, watching Isabella sleep. "Because all my life, people have abandoned me when I needed them most. My husband died early. My daughter left when I needed her most. And it was just me and Isabella. If I start to depend on you, what happens when you get tired and leave too?" "What if we don't?" asked Walter. "What if we stay and take care of you two like a real family?" At that moment, Isabella opened her eyes slowly. She looked around, seeing all the worried faces, and smiled weakly. "Grandma Doris, why is everyone sad?" she asked in a weak voice. "We're not sad, my little one," said Constance, stroking the girl's face. "We're worried because you got sick. But now I'm going to get better." Isabella looked at Dr. Harrison with her big, curious eyes. "Yes, you will," replied the doctor, smiling. "But you'll need to take medicine every day and have exams from time to time." "How's Grandpa Ben?" Roger stiffened. "How do you know about Grandpa Ben, Isabella?" "Grandma Doris told me. She said he's sick and that you don't take care of him right." Isabella looked innocently at Roger. "Is it true?" Doris lowered her head, ashamed. "Isabella, Grandma Doris lies sometimes," Isabella said simply. "She says Uncle Roger is bad, but I don't think he is. Yesterday he was crying in the car." The silence that followed was heavy. Doris looked at Roger with an expression that mixed guilt and surprise. "You cried?" she asked softly. Roger nodded. "I cry every time I visit my father. I cry because he doesn't recognize me. I cry because I can't give him the care he deserves, and I cry because you don't let me take care of Isabella as I would like. But you could have insisted more. I could have. And you could have asked why I really visited my father instead of assuming that I abandoned him." Roger paused. "Doris, we both made mistakes, but we can't let that continue hurting Isabella." Dr. Harrison got up. "I'll let you talk. Isabella can be discharged today, but she needs to start medication tomorrow." When the doctor left, Isabella sat up on the stretcher with difficulty. "Grandma Doris, can I say something?" "Of course, my little darling. I hear everything when you cry at night. You cry because you miss Mom, right?" Doris broke down completely. "I do, my little one. I'm so sorry." "Grandma Constance also cried," said Isabella, looking at Constance. "I saw when she thought I wasn't looking. You cried about the same thing." Constance approached, surprised by the child's perception. "How do you know?" "Because you both have the same sad look in your eyes, the same way I have when I think about Mom." Isabella held out her small hands. But now you can be friends and not cry alone. The childish observation had a wisdom that touched everyone present. Constance and Doris looked at each other, recognizing in each other the pain of losing a daughter. "Isabella is right," said Constance, extending her hand to Doris. "Maybe it's time to stop suffering alone." Doris hesitated for a moment, then shook the offered hand. I don't know how to accept help. It's been so long since I've taken care of everything alone." "Then let's learn together," said Constance, "step by step." Walter approached Roger. "And we're going to resolve your father's situation. Tomorrow we'll visit private clinics." "Mr. St. Clair, how am I going to pay for all that?" "We'll make a plan. Salary increase, profit sharing in the company, maybe even a small partnership in some future project. You've worked for me for 15 years, Roger. It's time to recognize that properly." Isabella clapped her hands weakly. "Does that mean we're going to be a big family now?" "I think so," said Constance, picking up the girl. "A very big and very united family." In the months that followed, the changes were gradual but profound. Ben was transferred to a private clinic where he received adequate care. To everyone's surprise, the improved environment and constant medical attention brought small improvements in his moments of lucidity. Doris, initially resistant, began to gradually accept help. Constance hired a domestic helper who worked part-time at the house in West Phoenix, giving Doris time to rest and take better care of herself. Isabella flourished under proper medical care and the love of her extended family. Her brilliant intelligence manifested itself in increasingly elaborate drawings and an insatiable curiosity about the world around her. Marlene, Roger's wife, finally met Isabella properly and fell in love with the girl. Roger's teenage children gained a cousin who adored them, and family gatherings became joyful and noisy events. But it was on a Thursday afternoon, during one of the regular visits to the home where Ben now lived comfortably, that the greatest revelation happened. Isabella was showing one of her drawings to her great-grandfather when he, in a moment of rare lucidity, held her little hand and said clearly, "You have Walter St. Clair's eyes. I knew him when he was little like you." Everyone stopped, looking at Ben in surprise. Walter approached the old man's bed. "Do you know me?" "I've known your family for 60 years, said Ben in a weak but clear voice. "Your grandfather, Theodore St. Clair, was my boss. I worked on his land when I was young. You worked for my grandfather?" "I did." "And this girl," Ben caressed Isabella's face, "is the great-granddaughter of Frank Santos, who was the foreman on your grandfather's land. Frank was Joanne's father." The revelation left everyone in shock. The families had been connected for 3 generations, and fate had conspired to bring them together through suffering and redemption. "Your grandfather was a good man," continued Ben. "When he had to sell the land to pay debts, he ensured that all employees would receive their homes as compensation. Frank won the house where Doris lives today." Doris approached the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Do you remember all this?" "I remember a lot when I'm calm," replied Ben, "and I remember that Frank always said that one day justice would return to these families, that the children would meet again." Walter sat heavily in a chair. His grandfather had never told details about the difficult time when he almost lost everything. Now he discovered that the land where he built his business empire had a history that directly connected his family to Isabella's. "Ben," said Walter with an emotional voice, "are you saying that Isabella has a right to that land?" "I have no right to anything," said Doris quickly. "Frank sold everything he had to try to save his daughter when she got sick." "But she has a right to recognition," said Walter, "to the recognition that our families have been linked for generations and that I have a moral responsibility to take care of you." Isabella, who had listened to everything carefully, climbed onto Walter's lap. "Does that mean you're really my family?" "It means we've always been family, my little one," replied Walter, hugging the girl. "We just didn't know." 2 years later, Isabella ran through the garden of the new house where she lived with Doris. a comfortable house that Walter had bought for them in the same neighborhood where he and Constance lived. Her colorful paintings decorated all the walls, and her joyful laughter echoed through the rooms that were once silent and sad. Ben lived his last years with dignity and comfort, surrounded by family love. Doris found peace in her days, finally free from the weight of the bitterness she had carried for so long. Roger was promoted to manager of one of Walter's stores, and Marlene became Constance's best friend. And Constance, who thought she had forever lost the chance to be a mother, discovered that maternal love can flourish in unexpected ways, creating ties even stronger than biological ones. On the night they formalized Isabella's adoption, with Doris retaining custody but Walter and Constance as legal guardians, the girl made a special drawing, a giant tree with many branches where several people holding hands formed a large and colorful family. "It's our family," she explained to everyone gathered around the dining table. "Everyone has their place in the tree, and no one will be alone anymore." And so, what began with a desperate accusation from a 4-year-old child turned into the reunion of families that destiny had separated for decades, proving that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as crises, and that true love always finds a way to unite hearts that belong to each other. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.